Thanks, Mark. My task is to speak about wetlands and water, the inseparable relationship between them, and the fact that this relationship is vital for life. And that's what I'm going to focus on. In terms of presentation outline, I'm going to speak about the only three problems of water that exist in our world: the healthy wetlands and water relationship, healthy wetlands and life relationship, and threats to these relationships. And finally, I'll end with a call. In terms of healthy wetlands and water, I just want to start by saying water is the anchor tenant in any one wetland system. And it mediates all the processes from functional processes to structural processes. The only three problems of water, as I stated before, it is either water is too much, is too little, or is dirty. Those are the only three problems of water. And I just want to start by the too little problem. The too little problem manifests itself in the form of drought. And when there's too little water, obviously the top photograph illustrates what does happen. And in terms of ecosystem services, the water provision, the watering of our animals, plants that depend on this water definitely do suffer. And human pressures are actually the major threat to this kind of relationship, the water and wetlands problem. Human pressures that manifest themselves in the form of artificial draining of wetlands historically in this country. We know that this is a problem that we've had for a long time, rooted into the history of into the agricultural history of this country, where wetlands were considered to be wastelands, as opposed to systems that are functional in themselves as they exist. Catchment changes and deterioration, overuse of water, unsustainable agricultural practices. Some of them do happen directly in wetlands. Some of them happen in the catchment of wetlands. And I'll come back to this relationship later on when I speak about the relationship between wetlands and life. The second one, the too much water, which we often call flooding. And the two photographs speak for themselves, what often happens. What I show in these photographs is actually the damage that results from too much water, and most of it that you can see in these photographs is damage to property. There is a lot of damage that also happens to nature as a result of too much water or flooding. The last problem, but perhaps before I get to the last problem, this problem is exacerbated by human pressures that show themselves in the form of urban development that is either unplanned or poorly planned. Poor stormwater management in urban areas does threaten this relationship. The last of the problems of water is that it could be dirty. Now, this is where you speak of water quality issues, and most of the water quality issues are actually driven by human beings, as you can see from these few photographs here. And the pressures that exacerbate this problem are poorly planned or unplanned human
Ferai, sorry, can I just jump in there?
Informal dwellings that actually directly.
Ferai, can you?
Yes, Mark.
Just stop a second there. Can I just ask you? Your voice seems to be coming in and out. Have you got a microphone around your neck or something, or are you just speaking directly into a microphone on your laptop?
I'm speaking directly to the microphone on my laptop.
Okay. Maybe if you could just.
Maybe I could try and get closer to it.
Yeah, that would probably be better. There's just a slight deterioration in your voice, fading in and out. If you could just be a bit closer, that would be better. But please carry on from where you are.
Okay. Thanks, Mark. I hope it gets better now that I'm a lot closer to the laptop.
Thanks.
So the pressures that actually exacerbate the water quality problem, I've spoken of unplanned human settlements, pollution as a result, mostly of our actions from agriculture to industry to, even domestic waste, and dumping, which is often human beings are the major culprit of this. Now, all these three problems of water that I've spoken about, wetlands have potential, and not that I say they have potential to address some of these problems. The reason why I say wetlands have potential to address the pollution problem, to address the water, the flooding problem and the drought problem, is because wetlands can only do so much. If we release raw sewage into our wetland systems, we cannot expect wetlands to do miracles. Now, in terms of how wetlands can fix the pollution, the drought problem, wetlands in their nature, and I'm just using one type of wetlands here to demonstrate how wetlands actually can buffer us against droughts. And I'm using peatlands. Now, wetlands in their nature are known for storing water. And I want to make it clear here that wetlands store water, they don't produce water. And a cubic meter of peat has been estimated to store up to about 800 liters of water. Peatlands also help us with carbon sequestration, and carbon is actually linked to climate change, and climate change is linked to both climate extremes. Weather extremes that use your droughts and your floods. However, and the reason why I'm going here just to show you that we're actually losing our peatlands. In this country, it's been estimated that about 70% of peatlands have actually been lost. And what this speaks to is that is a threat to the relationship between wetlands and water, wetlands and life. In terms of flooding, wetlands have also been reported to actually address or to alleviate the problem of flooding. And how do they do that? They are known to act as giant flood busters. That is, when water flows down into wetland systems, they act as large bowls that dissipate the energy with which the water flows into these systems. And as such, what that helps to do is actually to store that water for some time and release that water slowly downstream. And that gets to address the problem of drought, number one, but also the problem of flooding. In terms of healthy wetlands and life, in many cases, we often think of healthy wetlands and life in the context of just life that is supported within the wetland systems themselves. And that is in terms of plant life and animal life. However, the way wetlands support life is a lot broader than just what we see. And I want to make this point here that many of us often miss, and that is wetlands are connected to the greater landscape. This may be small facets of the landscape, but they perform very important functions in determining the character of a system. And the types of connectivities that you can speak of is hydrological connectivity, that is upstream, downstream connectivity through river systems or streams. Ecological connectivity, that is through rivers and streams from wetland to wetland. Genetic connectivity as well, geological connectivity. And wetlands are also connected to one another and to the broader landscape or the catchments. And this connectivity determines whether we have a dry or a wet landscape. And a dry or a wet landscape does speak much to what happens to life. So you can speak of wetlands connecting animals and plants and habitats through water, air, over land, and underground. They also provide access to food and habitat and conditions for mating, conditions for growth pathways and pathways for dispersal. And if you look at all of this that I'm talking about here, all of this relates to how wetlands do support life. However, this relationship of wetlands and their connection to life can actually best be described, can actually be threatened by human connectivity or human actions, around wetlands. Now, humans can alter the biophysical processes of wetlands and their functions. And in this context, we can actually look at wetlands as socio-ecological systems. Now, what threatens these relationships that we've spoken about, that is the relationship between wetlands and water and the relationship between wetlands and life. Wetlands in their nature are considered a finite resource. The way we interact with them and extract resources from them does determine whether we push them out of their boundaries of sustainability. Now, I'm borrowing here from the work of Johan Rockström, who are at the Stockholm Resilience Center, where they illustrated how we can push certain facets of our earth beyond the boundaries of sustainability. And if you think of wetland systems in terms of their major components, think of hydrology, think of geomorphology, think of vegetation. The way we benefit from these or extract resources from these systems can actually determine whether we push them out of their boundaries of sustainability or not. Now, humans are now at the center or are now the major mediators of the change that happens in wetlands. Historically, if you look at the 5 geological epochs, historically wetlands have been known to, change in the environment has been known to be mostly mediated by nature itself. But since the transition from Holocene to Anthropocene, much of the change is actually now driven by human beings. Now, if you look at what we have done to our globe, 1/4 of the land surface is still considered natural, but another 1/4 is actually transformed by humans into cities and agriculture. 1/4 of it is transformed for human use other than agriculture and cities. And all of this speaks to the pressures that we end up exerting on our wetland systems. And so in our bid, as I move to the call to action, in our bid to try and conserve these systems, human beings must be at the center. Last but not the least, my call to action to try and address some of the threats to these systems that we so need, because water, which is the source of life, is actually connected to wetlands inextricably. Life is also very much dependent on wetlands. Now, we've got the choice as human beings to decide what we would like to do. We have options oftentimes when we are faced with the major problems of water that I've spoken about, the flooding, the droughts, the water quality. And I'm going to speak about 2 other problems that have become an integral part of our globe. The one is that of poverty and the other is sustainability. Now, in terms of flooding, we've got to make choices. We could either take care of wetlands in such a way that they provide us with nature-based solutions, that is, protect them, restore wetlands, and take care of the rivers that connect them. Alternatively, we could simply make a choice to be dependent on, the human management interventions such as stormwater management, urban design, which often leads to emergency response. So, and if we think of droughts, if we think of water shortages, we think of floods, if we think of water quality, all of those may be mediated by, if we think of drought, we could, focus on taking care of the catchments within which our wetlands actually occur. And that is, we could clear invasives that occur there. We fix the wetlands, we store the floods through our wetlands, and then the wetlands does the work of filtering the pollutants and regulating sediment movement. Alternatively, we could go for purely human intervention, where we try to manage the demand side of water, optimizing usage, grey water supplementation, purification, and which may include desalinization, particularly for coastal areas. And all of these are by nature known to be high cost. And so it does make sense to me that if you look at just these 3 problems, flooding, droughts, water quality, and so on, it makes sense to more rely on nature-based solutions, and that is take care of our wetlands. And that is the greatest argument around which programs such as Working for Wetlands, some consultancy firms, some of them I can see that they're actually represented in this meeting, that focus on conservation of wetlands. This is actually the greatest argument for their existence. The poverty dimension that I wanted to talk about is actually a disaster in itself if you look at it in the context of Africa. So to alleviate poverty, my sense is that it is better to do good catchment management, promoting localized solutions, And our communities, particularly in poor settings, are mostly dependent on the environment. So ensure wise use of the wise use of the environment, including wetlands. Alternatively, we can simply promote employment, which we know is not solving the problem of poverty in our world. And employment levels, and I think from the previous budget speech, we all know that unemployment levels are actually increasing. Last but not the least is the problem of sustainability over resilience. Now, the relationship between water and wetlands, and the relationship between wetlands and water and life, there has to be some resilience built into those relationships. And that resilience we can build by ensuring that we invest in the restoration or conservation of those systems. Alternatively, we could simply say, let's just focus on, in trying to come up with technologies that fix this. But like I indicated earlier, wetlands are a finite resource. The more we over-extract them and pushing them beyond the boundaries of sustainability, the more we threaten the relationships that we have spoken about, the relationship between wetlands and water. And finally, wetlands do provide us all these goods and services, including water, including support to life, free of charge, but clearly not free of care. Thank you. That is my last.